I know we've all had some time now to process, since this was initially this idea of, early detection of a molecular alteration that influences what we do. We've had some time to kind of process that. And I know you were fortunate enough to participate in the clinical trial and have patients on the study. So maybe just start out by telling me your general impression of how it was to have patients on that study. How did they do with that whole concept?
Right. So I think it is such an exciting time to be able to speak about a totally different concept for us. For a long time, we have relied on radiographic progression to change therapy for people. And I think the last 10 years has really sort of been this lead up to a trial like this. And that I think was very exciting for investigators like myself. And it was very exciting and truly quite easy to describe it to a patient. I think the concept of let's test your blood to see if there is anything evolving that could suggest resistance to the treatment that you are on, and then explaining to them that the treatment that they are in fact on is very well tolerated, and that if they could remain on something that is not only oral but very well tolerated for a longer period of time, and that switching to something that is oral and not more complicated, that wouldn't add potentially more toxicity, was very, very appealing. That said, it did require quite a bit of monitoring. Patients needed to have stable disease. They needed to have scans that showed and proved that they were not progressing before they could be randomized. The concept of molecular testing for patients wasn't necessarily very overwhelming. I know that this is very controversial. Not everyone does this in their practice, but in my practice, I incorporated tumor marker testing in metastatic breast cancer for a long time. That was the way my previous partner functioned. I wasn't going to deviate from that.
Right.
And therefore, it wasn't difficult for them to just add in another blood test. And I think that's the beauty.
Can I ask you in your practice, I'm sorry to interrupt, but as we've all, my mentor was a huge, you didn't come to clinic without, okay, here's your tumor marker. And, and now the pendulum kind of shifted away from that. And now we're talking about, molecular assays. So when you were using a more traditional kind of tumor marker, and now that you've switched to this, molecular assay, looking at circulating tumor DNA, does that seem like a concept that the patients understand and they trust, and that wasn't any kind of issue for the trial?
I think from a patient's perspective, it wasn't hard. I think there was a learning curve for all of us because it did require a certain element in our clinic and staffing and supporting, sending out, having the result back, someone being there to analyze the results and then communicating that result to the patient. So there were layers and the learning curve in the trial for all of us. But in terms of the actual molecular concept and blood marker assessments and tumor markers, for me, that isn't hard. And I think many of us today are thinking beyond that too, right? Beyond molecular testing is, do we also check for ctDNA as a quantifier to measure in a more sophisticated way how patients are going to do or predict? And I think this trial showed us a bit of that. I think we're in the very, very early time point and understanding that and incorporating that. But I think the more comfortable we get, the more we'll learn, and therefore hopefully the benefit for patients is there.
Absolutely.